which is more important to, in your opinion, for memorizing that stuff? Is it the actual like memorizing the shapes of the triads, or is it being able to kind of take the name of the triad and then kind of work it out note wise and then figure it out on the fretboard?
It's situational. I would say there are some triads that are like they should be memorized, right? Like you should know what triad this is. So just an A major, right?
Yeah.
Like all of those ones, that those are really useful when you're improvising, right? To know, I mean, knowing all the triad shapes is really helpful when you improvise because you can see the chord tones. Say if you were improvising and there was an A major chord underneath you, well, you could play, right? Because you understand where the notes are that make up that chord, right? So it's
Right.
useful for that stuff. And but the reason that those specific triads are more useful is because if you were, say, in a situation where there were two guitar players and one guitar player was playing A, it could be useful for you to play something different, right?
Right.
So that's why I would emphasize those ones more than these ones per se. Like, right? Like this is an A as well, as you hopefully know, right?
Yep.
Or here,
Yep.
right? Because though when you use the bass strings like that, it gets more muddy, right? In the mix, you sound a little bit more muddy, you know, like. Like, you know, that's actually the same triad. They're just, you know, so why would you play that one if someone's playing this? It just wouldn't make sense, right? Maybe you can play something like this. So
Right.
So basically, long story short, when it comes to triad shapes built off of the D string and the G string, right? So they live on these strings. Those ones are higher priority than ones that are, say, built off the A string, right? So I playing an A major triad off the A string here.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So those ones are not quite as useful. And that kind of splits things in half, right? Because you can build a triad, you can only build a triad off of 4 strings. Or like you know what I mean? Like, because if you're building it off of 1 string, you can still play 3 strings, but the one that you're building it off of, right? So playing this triad shape, I'm building it off the G string. But there are 3 notes, but for that reason, I can only build off of 4 strings because, for example, building it off 1 string, building it off a different string, building it off the A string now, and now I've exhausted all the strings, right? So
Yep.
when you're building it off of the D string or the G string, and you're not worried so much about building it off of the A string or the E string, well, that's half of the triads that you don't have to prioritize as much. Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So what was the other part of your question? I think that was only the first part.
Yeah, that's okay. I think it was more so along the lines of, because my thing is for like especially the suspended and diminished chords, like
Oh, I remember the rest of your question, but continue.
yeah, just which is more of a priority for that kind of stuff? Is it memorizing this actual shape, or is it being able to actually build the triad from the notes themselves?
Yeah. So building the triad from the actual notes is more important. It's more important to because this is one side of it, right? Being able to memorize them and then have the knowledge to build them, and then the other side would be instantly knowing them, right? So
Yes.
the ones that I just talked about are worth instantly knowing, like that. But other triads that are not worth instantly knowing per se, like take a diminished triad, right? So I could play this. I mean, knowing like like let's actually build a root position A diminished, right? So we got A diminished here. Even right now, I have the shapes memorized, but in terms of like building them off of the right notes, I do have to think about it for a second. And then I can build it off of E flat, which would look like get my A in my right. So knowing those, like it's like as long as you can build them as I just did. I don't have them like snap memorized, but I can build them relatively quickly, right? Certain triad shapes, being able to figure them out is enough, right?
Okay. Yes.
But then there are going to be some shapes that are just more important and you should have ready to go. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those diminished shapes, I mean, like really even what I just played, like I mean, like those shapes I don't even see as like super useful, because when you're improvising, you're not going to play a diminished triad. You're going to play a fully diminished seventh arpeggio, right? And
Right.
those are symmetrical. So, I mean, it doesn't matter like the voicing that you're going to play if you're playing a diminished seventh triad, because or a diminished seventh chord, sorry, not a triad. Because if you're playing a diminished seventh chord, all of the inversions look the same, right?
Yep.
They're all the exact same. So it's not so important to have the order of the notes memorized. Like, oh, this is root position, this is first inversion, this is second inversion. You know what I mean? So it's just not important. Like